As a child, he and his brother plundered the customers of his mother, who ran a brothel in Istanbul. The gang leader committed his first murder when he beat an Ottoman pudding manufacturer to death with a pole and then stole all his money. He also ended up in prison, but managed to escape through a tunnel that he and his cellmates had dug out with their own hands. These and many other crimes were committed by the most feared gang leader in the largest city of the Ottoman Empire at the time. After the end of the First World War, the Ottoman Empire also came to an armistice. Istanbul was occupied by British, French, and Italian troops, and the enemy soldiers roamed the streets unmolested. The city was divided into sections, and the respective armed forces were then stationed there. At that time, Istanbul had a very diverse population of around 1 million people, and one of them was Hristo Anastasiadis Veled I Ahilya, who gained a reputation as the violent killer Hrisantos. Hrisantos was an Ottoman of Greek descent and was born in Istanbul in 1889 in a district called Beyoglu. His father had left the family and moved to Athens, and his mother was a woman who ran a brothel in Beyoglu. Even as a small child, Hrisantos accompanied his older brother Koso on his criminal path. They were pickpockets on streetcars or beat the men who visited their mother's brothel and then robbed them. Over time, he also became friends with other notorious criminals of the time, such as Harito, Zafiri, Fantoma Mehmet, and noodle maker Niko. They were up to mischief in several districts around Beyoglu. At night, they threatened neighbors on the streets with guns and pocket knives, and also robbed several stores. Early one morning, Hrisantos went into a store where he and his comrades brutally murdered Recep, a 65-year-old pudding manufacturer. This was his first murder. This act caused fear and terror among the citizens of the entire district. But a short time later, Hrisantos was caught by the police and put in a cell. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The people were very pleased with the sentence, but this state of affairs was not to last very long. One day, when the daily newspapers were handed out, there was a report about Hrisantos. The prisoner and his henchmen, Fantoma Mehmet and pasta maker Niko, had dug a tunnel in his cell and escaped. The police searched unsuccessfully for the fugitives until one day Mehmet Efendi from the police station in Taksim caught them in the act. In a side alley, Hrisantos and his gang had cornered and harassed a woman. When Mehmet Efendi saw this, he pulled out his gun and a gunfight ensued. The officer was shot and died on the spot. After this incident, the pursuit was intensified, and a commissioner named Fahri Effendi decided to visit a suspected gang area with a special force. However, Fahri Effendi was also shot dead by Hrisantos in the street. Another time, civil servant Ibrahim Effendi encounters the gang and secretly takes up the chase. But Hrisantos realizes that he is being followed and mercilessly shoots him in the head in a side alley. Further skirmishes ensued between the police and the gang. In addition to other officers, accomplices Harito and Zafiri also died, meaning that Hrisantos lost 2 of his loyal companions. Harito was actually in prison serving his sentence, but after the British invaded Istanbul, they released some of the prisoners. They were then given undercover assignments and were also handsomely rewarded. In addition to Harito, Hrisantos is also said to have worked for the British for some time. Pasta maker Niko was also caught after several robberies, thanks to the police's cooperation with one of the gang's victims. Hrisantos was also one of the accomplices in most of the crimes, but he always managed to escape and go into hiding. However, Niko had revealed the gang's hideouts during his interrogation. The gang leader was now cornered. Now that he had lost all his comrades and was on his own, he decided to flee to Greece. Together with his girlfriend Eftimia, he moved to Piraeus in March 1920. There he started running a tavern. But it wasn't long before Hrisantos lost his nerve again. When a soldier harassed his girlfriend Eftimia, Hrisantos once again drew his pistol and shot the soldier. However, he then flees to Thessaloniki without Eftimia and sends his girlfriend back to Istanbul. A short time later, the former gang leader also moved back to Istanbul to be with his girlfriend under a new fake identity. But Eftimia's father fears for his daughter's life and visits a police station. He told the police the whereabouts of Hrisantos, who had in the meantime joined forces with the new gang kingpin in Beyoglu called Nobar. On July 8, 1920, the police began the operation. When the two were staying in a fisherman's house, Inspector Muharrem Effendi and Officer Kafir Tayyar burst through the window of the room where Hrisantos was sleeping. There was a collision. Hrisantos was hit by a bullet and landed on the ground. But when he pointed his gun at Tayyar again and pulled the trigger, Tayyar, who was only slightly wounded, also fired his entire magazine. Together with Commissioner Muharrem Effendi, they had finally managed to defeat Hrisantos. The two policemen then received a reward and a Mechedai medal from the Sultan. Between 1918 and 1920, a total of 40 people, including 13 policemen, died at the hands of Hrisantos' gang. The gun with which he was shot is still kept in a police museum today.